This is Generation Stadia, giving you that daily dose of everything and anything Stadia related, and it's about time we do another State of Stadia. In case you don't know, this is where I take a look at Stadia as a whole, where it's come from, where it's at right now, what I like, dislike, and give my honest take on everything it has. Now, before I begin, I actually want to give a quick notice that if you're a fan of the channel, be sure to stick around for the end of video message, as it's going to be quite important. There's a few important things I want to talk about regarding the future of the channel and want your feedback on. But now with that out of the way, let's get right into the topic at hand. We are now officially 8 months into the Stadia life cycle, and there's been a fair amount of additions to the Stadia platform since the last State of Stadia on the channel. Back then, I stated that Stadia wasn't ready for the general public and that there was a lot of work that needed to be done. I even went as far to state that I didn't recommend it to the general user due to the limited selection of games and slow rollout of features. So the real question is, where do I stand now? Well, I'm happy to report that a lot of that has changed and I have a much more positive outlook on the platform. But please don't misunderstand that for me saying it's a perfect platform. There are plenty of issues that it still needs to resolve, and we'll be addressing those later in this video. But for now, I think it's safe to say that the general user can have a good experience with Stadia. There is no longer a buy-in required. You can try it out for free by just signing up for a Stadia account, and you'll have 1 month of Stadia Pro, which gives you access to a good amount of games to try for yourself. That means you don't even have to buy anything to see whether or not it's worth your time or if your connection can actually handle it. The best part is that the games a part of Stadia Pro are from a variety of genres, so you get to really try out the type of games you're interested in to see if they work well enough. The removal of the necessary purchase of a Stadia Premier Edition really goes a long way. I'd go as far to argue that the majority of people badmouthing Stadia without talking about their first-hand experience with the platform shouldn't be discussing it, period. To this day, I still have people commenting on my videos stating that you need to pay for Stadia Pro to play the games you've already bought, or need to buy a Premier Edition to even access Stadia. So accessibility to actually try Stadia out is much improved, but far from perfect. But before we dive into negatives, I still want to continue with some other positive additions. How about the Stadia game library? Has it gotten any better? Well, yes it has, but if you've been a Stadia user since the very beginning, it hasn't always been easy. I think I speak for many in the community when I say that for a couple of months we went through a lot of concern due to the lack of games being added to the platform. Thankfully, since then we're getting a lot more releases, and it seems to be much more of a steady stream of games rather than a random droplet every now and then. A couple of notable titles that launch day and date on Stadia would be Doom Eternal and F1 2020. We've also received a few great ports to the library, such as The Division 2, The Elder Scrolls Online, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and more. As of right now, there are currently 61 games available for purchase on Stadia, and while that's still a far cry away from other platforms, it's much improved. There are also an additional 36 games coming to Google Stadia on top of that. Within those 36, there are some major names included as well. We're talking big names like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Baldur's Gate 3, Dirt 5, FIFA 21, Madden 21, and more. The last very notable improvement when it comes to the games being ported over is the port job themselves. It seems like a lot of the newer titles that have released on Stadia play significantly better than that of what launched with the platform. Now, whether this is due to those games being rushed for launch, or whether developers are just starting to come to grips with how to develop for it, they're better now. A good example of this is The Division 2, which plays fantastically on Stadia, and also supports features like crossplay. But the biggest standout title has to be Doom Eternal. That game plays so much like it does on my local PC, it's astonishing. When it originally came out, it looked fantastic, but there was a slight noticeable difference, but they updated it since then, and my god, is it better. I also remember many of the launch games actually suffered from a few glitches, such as deleting your save file and such, and while it isn't completely gone, it's a very rare instance that a new game has any bugs. So when it comes to the games themselves, things are certainly looking better, and I'm not just talking about the volume of games, but also the quality. But, and yes, there's always a but, isn't there? It's far from ideal, and there's things that need to get addressed, but before we get into that, we need to discuss the Stadia feature set. Back when Stadia launched, it was pretty barren in terms of what you could do outside of playing games and joining a party chat. A lot of the highly touted features such as state share, crowd play, and crowd choice didn't launch alongside Stadia. 8 months later, we're still kind of waiting on quite a few of those. While we do have a state share beta with Crata, it's still far from what we were promised when they was initially shown. In the latest Stadia Connect, we did get confirmation of crowd play and crowd choice launching soon with Dead by Daylight in September. But that's not to say that Google's just been sitting on their hands this entire time. They've added quite a few features, they're just more basic ones that you would expect any gaming platform to have. Things like achievements and additional privacy settings come to mind. Aside from that, they've also added touchscreen controllers for the mobile device. Speaking of which, pretty much any Android phone can now play Stadia games as soon as you enable the experimental feature on. Another really big addition was 4K support for desktops, as well as letting you choose individually what settings you want for each device. That means if you want a game at 720p on your mobile device, you can adjust it specifically just for your mobile phone and it won't affect the setting on your TV or desktop. They've made numerous other additions as well, but that pretty much covers the big ones I really wanted to highlight. And now it's time to talk about the negatives, and let's stick with the topic at hand. When it comes to features, there's still a lot of stuff missing. For instance, there is still no messaging system whatsoever. If you want to contact a buddy to see if they're down to play a game, you can only outright invite them to your party or invite them to the game itself. Otherwise, if you want to ask to set something up for later, you're best doing it outside of the Stadia platform, probably through Discord or any other messaging app. Then stuff like family shares still hasn't been fully implemented. There is currently no way to share the games on your account with other family members under the same roof, a feature that's become standard everywhere else. And when it comes to some of the features that they've already added, some of them aren't fully implemented everywhere yet. Take achievements for example. You can view them on your PC, but you can't actually see them on your mobile phone or Chromecast Ultra. When it comes to the Stadia storefront, the Chromecast Ultra UI still has no access to it. So as you can see, there are a few other additions that still need to be addressed. And on the bright side of things, we do know that they are working on many of these things in the background. The reason we know this is in the works is thanks to data miners who are looking at the website itself as well as the app every time it updates. So despite the fact that some basic features are still missing, at least we do know that they are making their way over. But now let's discuss accessibility. As I mentioned earlier, it is now easier than ever to try Stadia out, and there's no upfront cost blocking you from even demoing it out for yourself. But there's one really big glaring issue when it comes to this topic. In terms of regional support, we're still stuck looking at the exact same regions that were supported back when it launched. This sorta nullifies the statement that anyone interested in Stadia can now try it for free because a few people have to use VPNs for a workaround, and for others that just doesn't work. Another really important part of accessibility that is still missing is any sort of iOS support, and while I do agree that this isn't something that's necessarily Google's fault since Apple pretty much controls their App Store, it is still something that many people out there, including many of the community members here, are really hoping to see. And going on about accessibility, another key feature I would like to see Google incorporate to Stadia is a button remapper. I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing that Stadia supports so many input devices, but having a button remapper would really open things up for many users. And now let's discuss the games. This side of the story has improved a ton, and while there are some very good games coming soon to the Stadia storefront, there are still really big titles that appear to be missing. The game I get asked about most on this channel is one title that has not been confirmed for Stadia. I'm talking about none other than Call of Duty. No matter how you feel about the title or the franchise itself, there's no way you can underestimate it. It has to be one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name in console gaming. And as of yet, we haven't had any confirmation of Activision Blizzard games, and that also includes big titles like Overwatch, Diablo, and more. Another really big segment of the gaming market that's missing on Stadia is free-to-play. Now this is a very interesting topic because it's one that we don't know how Google will address. There have been numerous videos discussing this very topic, not just from me, but almost every other Stadia content creator out there. There's no question about it, free-to-play gaming is a huge market in the gaming landscape. Titles like Fortnite, Apex Legends, Warframe, Call of Duty Warzone are all massive successes, and I'm barely scratching the surface there. While I don't doubt that Google knows this, I do wonder if they know how they're going to address it. After all, they're offering the Stadia platform free already at a 1080p resolution. And putting free-to-play games without any sort of cost or time limit on how long you can play can easily lead to some issues like queue times. While there have been many suggestions and ideas put out by the Stadia community, personally I'm a big fan of just locking them behind Stadia Pro. There has been no official confirmation of any sort of free-to-play title coming to Stadia directly from Google at this time. So taking all of this into account, where do I stand with Google Stadia today? Honestly, if games like Cyberpunk 2077, FIFA 21, Madden 21, Baldur's Gate 3, or any of the other big heavy hitters coming to Stadia interest you, I'd really recommend you give Stadia a shot. And I'm not saying go out and buy these titles on Stadia day one. Especially if it's a heavy multiplayer focused title without any sort of crossplay, since Stadia still suffers on that front. But even if you're just a little bit interested in cloud gaming and seeing what the hype is about, I'd highly suggest you try out Stadia Pro's free trial and check it out for yourself. If you find that experience good enough, then I would suggest you try and pick up one of those big games coming to Stadia. Speaking on a completely personal basis here, if I had the choice and option of buying Death Stranding on Stadia instead of PC, I would have bought it on Stadia. The freedom that Stadia gives you, not just in terms of being able to play on any screen in your house with the proper setup, but also in the sense that it gives you quick and easy access to any game that you own without having to worry about downloading the game, and just being able to play in an instant is very satisfying. The thing is, if you play a game or two that way and you're completely happy with the experience, it makes it really hard to go back. It's very much like when you use Netflix for the first time, and I'm not talking about having access to a huge library because that's not what Stadia is. I mean in the sense that you can just quickly launch it and be into whatever you're interested in a matter of seconds. You don't have to worry about swapping discs or downloading and installing updates or downloading the game even. You simply click and play, and that's as easy as it gets. And when I combine that with some of the major releases coming to Stadia this year, I have to say yes, I finally do think that Stadia is good enough for the general consumer to try out. Because even when you take a look at the negative side of things, accessibility and features missing we know are being worked on right now. The hardest thing that Google has to figure out is the game selection, and it seems like they're on the right path. Square Enix, 2K, Ubisoft, and EA are now showing support for Stadia. The big major players left out right now are Activision Blizzard and Epic Games. I really do expect them to hop aboard if all these other major companies are starting to make their way, and I think EA's involvement is a really big deal. But as we've seen over the past year, this is an issue that only time will fix. It's a key component for games being added to the Stadia library, but also very important for Google to really make those big first-party exclusives that show what the hardware can do. Either way, that pretty much summarizes all my thoughts on the current state of Stadia. That said, I'm very interested to hear where you stand with Stadia. Are you still using it? Are you going to continue using it? Or have you already dropped it? Do let me know in the comments section below. I look forward to reading your thoughts. Now, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that like button as it really does help the channel out. And if you're wanting more content like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell as well. As for those of you who stick around for the end of video message, first off, thank you for your support. It really does mean a lot to me. Today's end of video message is going to be fairly important as it has to do with the future of the channel. There's a few things I want to address in terms of expectations on what to expect out of the channel itself, but also some topics that I want to talk about coming soon. First off, I want to address the Stadia news type videos. After the most recent Stadia Connect and a lot of the disappointment that I saw online, I want to make it very clear that at this point going forward, all my news videos will be strictly news content. And if you're wondering what that means, basically I'll only be talking about 100% confirmed things. You can expect things out of big publication sites like interviews, Stadia Pro deals, and other things confirmed directly from Google. But I know plenty of you out there are still a big fan of the speculation and rumor type content. So for that, I'll be making a separate video series aside from Stadia news. What you can expect out of there is ESRB leaks, rumors, speculation, and even data mined info. Being a voice in the community means that I want to be sure to give you guys the right info and not to mismanage your expectations for what we expect out of these Google events. The second topic I want to bring up is streaming. I want to know how interested you all are in me doing some streaming sessions and possibly playing with you all in the community. The truth behind why I don't stream is simply that my internet provider doesn't give me enough upload bandwidth to actually play on Stadia and stream that session to YouTube. And the only way for me to actually be able to improve that upload bandwidth is by moving to a business plan, which is considerably more expensive. That said, it's not out of the question, and it's going to be pretty much up to just how much interest there is within the community for that sort of content. This would allow me to not only play with you all and take advantage of upcoming features such as crowd play and crowd choice, but more importantly, have a more direct line of communication with the community. And if that sort of thing does interest you, be sure to let me know, because my decision will be entirely based on that. The third and final topic I want to talk about on the channel is what you can expect me to talk about in the near future. You will be seeing me discuss other cloud gaming platform news on the channel fairly soon, but please don't worry. This isn't me jumping ship. I will still primarily focus on Stadia, but I do want the freedom to discuss what I'm interested in. One thing that's become clear to me about doing YouTube over the past year is that I feel much more motivated to talk about something when I definitely have interest in it. And I know for a fact that in the past there's been times where I've avoided talking about a particular topic simply because it's not directly related with Stadia. But it's become more and more clear to me that my best videos tend to be the ones where I'm most excited to talk about the topic at hand. So do look forward to other cloud gaming platforms being discussed here in the near future. And that's all I have to say for this end of video message. Other than that, once again, a big thank you to those of you who stuck around and listened, because you really are important. Without all of your support, I wouldn't be here making these videos, and it really does mean the world to me that many of you have stuck around since day one. And for those of you who just joined the Gen S community recently, welcome. I hope to see you stick around, because we're gonna be in this for the long haul and there's plenty more to come. As always, this has been Generation Stadia, giving you that daily dose of everything and anything Stadia related. The Gen S community is over 4,700 strong and growing by the day, and until next time, I'll catch you in the clouds.